Hello. So, there's a reason I wanted to meet with you today. And I want you to take this in the best possible way. But as you've been watching my videos, you may be thinking, wow, this guy is giving us everything we need to set up all the Kubernetes stuff without having to pay, somebody like AWS or Azure to take care of things, right? We have everything we need. And I am, and that's the goal, right? If you want to pay for those services, I want you to do it because you're choosing to do so and not because you just don't have the ability. It's nice to know what you're paying for if you could do it yourself, but you just don't want to, right? So, along that line, you may have noticed, like, hey, he hasn't given us the settings for SE/Linux or how to configure the firewalls, right? Because in a production environment, you would want to have those things correct. And yeah, that's true. I haven't given you that, and I'm not going to. And I want to tell you why. I have a reason, and then I want to tell you a story to explain um, something that happened in the past, which I think might cause you to be interested and perhaps study SE Linux a little more. So the reason I don't want to tell you how to do it is because in a production environment, if you were to blindly run some commands given you by somebody on the internet to configure the firewall, to configure SE Linux, they might be accurate for this time that the video is being made, but something could change in the future. And I wouldn't want to give you something that wouldn't last through the test of time, right? That if someone were to see this video in the future and run the commands or maybe mistype some of the commands, maybe everything wouldn't be in place that needs to be. So security is a big deal and we don't want to wing it, right? And if you don't know what SE Linux is, then it's kind of risky to just run some random commands that you're getting off the internet. So if we've reached this point and you're wanting the SE Linux commands, then I suspect you don't have the experience to run SE Linux. At least that's who this video is made for. And I want to tell you that I do know the commands. I do know how to configure the firewall. I do know how to configure SE Linux. And it's because I signed up for a class, right? I took a class at a Demi for like $20. I studied for the RHCE and then I got the certification. And that's why certifications are great, right? They help to fill in missing knowledge. And in my case, I didn't know SE Linux until I pursued the RHCE. So I did know about it, as most people do, enough to see that at some point something wasn't working and to Google the situation and to find the advice to just turn off SE Linux. And that's what a lot of us end up doing. We just turn it off and then what do you know? Everything's working now. Well, okay. So that's sometimes the solution, or at least, in a home lab, right? Maybe the people online posted like, don't do this in production. Who knows? But I wanted to tell you a story to help explain what SE Linux is. Because if you're turning it off and you don't know how to turn it on and configure it in production, this may be relevant. Because once I learned what it actually did, it was pretty awesome to have the ability to work with it, right? Because I could see the value. And this is the story. So back in college, I'm dating myself like 20 years ago. It's actually, this bug might be even more than that. It might be like 23, 24. I don't know. I've been using Linux since pretty sure 96 or 97. In any case, there was a bug at that time, PHF. And that's why I'm giving you the date in case you actually want to fact check what I'm telling you. There was a PHF bug and allowed you through a web browsing session to look at any file on the hard drive, right? On the Linux system. And this is Linux in the early days had a lot of security issues. And in any case, so as far as an example goes, the PHF bug was pretty fun, right? I had some good times with this where you could look at the password file, of course, which is different than these days where you got the shadow, but you had the password file and you could see the encrypted password, and then you could begin brute force seeing the password, right? And I did this to much delight back then. This is the days when hacking was a little more about, just solving a puzzle for fun, not malicious, not like these days where the hackers all wear the gloves with the fingers cut off and they wear the hoodies and they're in the darkness and they're stealing from people. It's a different thing these days. It's like the word has been renamed, but back then it was more like just solving a puzzle, getting access, and then just walking away. And I did that. I through some contacts I found a vulnerable site, and they didn't tell me what was vulnerable about it. I had to make the effort, but eventually I figured it out. It was vulnerable to the PHF, and then I got the password, and then I got the password file, and then I ran the brute force, and I got some passwords, and then I logged in, right? Not through secure shell, not through telnet. I had to use our login, but in any case, I got in, right? And this was fun and exciting, but you don't want that in your environment, right? And that's something that SELinux would prevent, right? So SELinux only allows an application to access the folders it's supposed to, right? So if you have a web browser and it's accessing var www like it's supposed to, everything works. But if somebody used that web browser to access a URL that's outside of the expected path, it wouldn't work, right? So SELinux would have prevented this PHF situation from happening. Even though PHF would have the bug, the person still wouldn't have access to the system. And that's what we want, right? So back then, Linux folks, Linux admins, they were the security personnel. It was before, security was a separate job, a separate title, a separate specialty. So everybody using Linux administration needed to know this, and nothing's changed. You still need to know these things. So if you know SELinux, you can, by default, it allows certain access between certain programs, and that's there, and then you can grant access to another file location, or you can remove an access, right? And there's also the ability around file recovery, which we won't get into. But if you don't know how to use SELinux, I would say, like, in a production environment, you never want to turn it off. Never, not even once. Right? You need to have SELinux configured right in a production environment. So if it's not currently a tool in your tool belt, I would recommend looking into it, right? And getting a knowledge of it. It's something everybody should know. And I'm sure when it comes to applying for jobs, if you have two people and one person knows how to use SELinux and the other person doesn't, I would definitely say hire the person who knows SELinux. So that's why I'm not going to tell you, right? Because I had to learn it myself in pursuit of the RHCE, as well as firewalls. Those are both in there. And then you'll know how to use SELinux if you go for those certificates. You'll know how to use the firewalls, and you'll be able to configure it yourself. And then you can be responsible for it, right? If it's in production, if there's an issue, if you have to change things later on, you can take care of it, right? I hope this message has been received well. Thank you.